Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve. Today on my channel, I am so excited to share an interview I did with a Hollywood legend. He has appeared in a number of MGM musicals from the golden age of Hollywood musicals, and he is best known for his Oscar-winning performance of Bernardo in West Side Story, George Chakiris. We actually had scheduled this interview a while back, but we had some technical difficulties with it, so we ended up having to reschedule. But I did the interview today, or at least today, the day that I'm filming this video, and now I can finally share it. If you enjoy this interview, please be sure to like and comment, show the interview, and show George some love. George also has his new memoir out, My West Side Story, a memoir which goes into detail, sharing numerous stories from his career, not only from West Side Story, but loads of other projects, including many MGM musicals, other films, television, theater. If you want to hear even more of his stories, since we could not get to all of them in this interview, you are just going to have to get the book and read it to hear all about that old school era of Hollywood. Until then, enjoy the interview.
I wish I could help you, but I'm technically lousy.
Listen, George, I am not kidding when I say that I grew up watching West Side Story 1961 on a loop. I don't remember if it was VHS or DVD, but I know I watched it over and over again. So I will bend over backwards with whatever technological malfunctions. I will figure it out because I'm very grateful to be able to speak with you.
I want you to know that I'm totally patient. I want to do anything that I can to help you, so I will bend over backwards too.
Whenever you're doing these interviews, a lot of people really love to ask you about people like Marilyn Monroe, which, of course, I don't mind talking about Marilyn Monroe. She's on my wall. But I really feel compelled to ask you about Gene Kelly because he's someone that I watched so much growing up, in addition to you. And the fact that you were on sets with him more than once, so I don't know if you want to start with the first story or the second story, whatever you prefer. But I believe it's two projects, one earlier on and then one later on in your career.
I was in the chorus of Brigadoon, which Gene Kelly, and I was one of the four guys in the sword dance in Brigadoon, which was directed by Gene and choreographed by Gene. It was eventually cut from the film, so it was never seen. So I got to be with him in the chorus, and also one of the four guys in the sword dance. And then in 67, I think it was, I was in a French musical with him called The Young Girls of Rochefort. We had our parts didn't connect, so we didn't work with each other that way, but I was around him a fair amount of time.
I'm curious because he's someone that obviously I've never met him. I've only read things about him and watched interviews and things like that. And I'm fascinated by on screen he has this persona of being the everyman. He's got this big warm smile, but he also had this reputation for being very tough as a director and as a choreographer. So, what was your impression of him as a working professional on set?
A couple of things come to mind. Working in the chorus of Brigadoon, I remember one day, kind of late in the day, he came. He was called to work, I guess, a little bit later in the day, maybe at 3 or 4 o'clock. And I didn't hear what he was. He and Vincent Minnelli had a very minor exchange. And when he came in to be ready for that day, he pointed to his face, and I thought he was talking about his makeup. And I got the impression, this is not fact, it's just my impression. I got the impression that he wasn't happy with his makeup, and so he didn't work that day. So that's what I gathered from just watching that exchange from him and Vincent. And the only other time I was around him, again, not working in any scenes with him, but socially working on the Young Girls of Rochefort. One of the things that happened, this may be of interest to you or not, but his wife, Jeannie Coyne, I got a letter from her one day when we were working on that film in France, and it was a very sweet letter. And she asked, his birthday was coming up, and his favorite breakfast was ham and I'm sorry, some kind of ham. I can't remember. I can't think what it's called right now. And eggs. It was something he really loved as a breakfast. And of course, I think it was. I'll think of it. But of course, that was not available in France. So she sent me a tin of it with the letter, and saying, "Could you please, as a surprise him on his birthday?" Well, I was so happy to do that. You know, it was so much fun. And we got the Jean and the two girls, Catherine and Francoise, and Grover Dale and I were in a big house by the ocean, and so we got the chef to prepare this beautiful breakfast, corned beef hash. That's what it was, corned beef hash. We got him to prepare this tray of a beautiful breakfast, probably with a rose and a card from Jeannie on the tray. And he was thrilled. It was so successful, he thought she was there, but of course she wasn't. But so that's it was so much fun to do that for him because he really loved it. And I thought so. I was so glad that she got in touch with me about it. I mean, it was fun. I really loved doing it. So now. The thing I remember about Gene on working on that film was that I got the impression he was putting off really getting in shape, you know. He was kind of, I don't think I probably shouldn't, this is just, see, I don't know what to say because I want to be careful what we say about people, because if you don't have the facts, you really shouldn't say anything. But he, I'll tell you one thing about I didn't watch him film his sequences in that movie, but of course we all heard what was going on, you know. And Gene, in his creation of musical numbers for movies, and he was fantastic, of course. But his way of working was, I would say, the opposite of what the director of that, Jacques Demy, did. Jacques would want to do long takes of a number, and then he was going to do all the editing in the editing room. The way Gene created a number for film was he would, in the creation of the number, he knew exactly for the first 4 bars where the camera was going to be in rehearsal for that four bar, and where the camera would be for the next 4 bars, and so on. So he created in his mind the way he wanted that number to look. So he did short takes, as it were, as opposed to filming the whole thing from different angles and then putting it together. So we all heard that Gene wasn't thrilled with the way Jacques Demy was doing, because he's having to do these long takes that were you know, where you wouldn't see most of it. So it was worked for no reason, you know. But that was the way Jacques Demy worked, and I think that's ultimately what happened. And one day, what Jacques Demy did for Gene and for the rest of us as well, he put together about 10-minute sequence of editing the film the way he was going to do it, to show everybody what to expect. And everybody liked what he did. So I think Gene got comfortable seeing that too. But they had such opposite ways of working. And the truth is, Gene's way of working was the way to create a musical number for film. I mean, he was a master at that, camera angles and so on for the different section of a number. Am I making sense?
Yes, absolutely. No, this is all fascinating to me because I mean, I've often wondered about his approach as a choreographer and director, because I know that he did a fair bit of directing. I mean, people think of him as a performer, which of course he was, but there was a lot more that he did that was also hands-on behind the scenes of things. And I get that you're very diplomatic, but I don't think anything you've said is coming across like you're making anyone look bad. It's just creatives having different techniques and visions.
That's right. And working with Gene as a director was something that I never had the good fortune to do. But so I'm sort of an observer of bits and pieces. I think he directed Hello Dolly with Streisand. I think he did that. So he did, but you know, in Singing in the Rain, which is such a great musical, I'll just focus on Sid Charisse and you know that green dress and how. But when you look at just that number and the way it's photographed, the camera angles for the different sections, it's so perfect. It's so perfect, and that was one. That was Gene. You know, because Gene knew better than anyone, I suppose, how to photograph a musical sequence or a number, and it was, and that's proof of it right there. Just if you just sit and Singing in the Rain in that Greek, and she was so beautiful, but the way the camera angles for the different sections of that dance that she did are just, it enhances everything she does dramatically.
Yes. Well, and wasn't she in Brigadoon?
She was, my God, of course, yeah. She
Yeah, so
was.
that's why it was because I had actually never watched Brigadoon until I was preparing, doing a lot of research to talk to you, because that's one of the lesser known Gene Kelly musicals, and I was reading all about the kind of industry drama side of things about how budgets were cut, so that's why it was filmed on a studio set as opposed to actually going to Scotland to film, and it was a whole thing. And you know, it's fun to read about drama when it's way long ago, because it's, you know, nobody's feelings are going to get hurt about it now because it's all over and done with. But no, it was quite interesting because it's a reunion between Gene Kelly and Sid Charisse, but it's also a reunion of Gene Kelly and Vincent Minnelli, who already, this is post An American in Paris, which was the bigger hit at the time. I mean, now I think people prefer Singing in the Rain, but at the time that was the highly decorated, big Oscar-winning musical.
And by the way, for what it's worth, you know, this thing about the sets in Brigadoon, I thought the sets were perfect because Brigadoon is it's a fantasy story, really. So the fact that I was never bothered with the sets myself. I thought they were beautiful, perfect, and to be actually in Scotland, I don't know. I liked. I thought the sets really suited the piece myself.
So would it be all right if I ask about Vincent Minnelli? Because of course he's another legend of that era of Hollywood, and you know, the father of Liza Minnelli, and yeah.
Well, of course, again, I never had the pleasure of working with Vincent. I got to know him later with his wife. We were good friends. I spent a lot of time at his house with a lot of wonderful people. Gene was never there. Fred Astaire was, and so that's basically how I know Vincent. I don't know him professionally except as an observer and appreciation of his work.
I don't remember where I saw this bit of trivia floating around, and you might, I don't know if you know this or not because it's not directly about you, but I could have sworn that I saw somewhere online that Russ Tamblyn, your co-star in West Side Story, was kind of self-conscious about his dancing in West Side Story until Fred Astaire told him that he did a good job. I don't know if that's true or not, or if you've heard anything about it.
My understanding of that story was that after the film was done and was out, that Fred Astaire, in a social setting or something, said something like that to Russ, but not. I don't think Russ was inhibited or thinking anything like that when we were working on the film. I think he was pretty confident about what he was doing, and also the fact that they included some, and beautifully so, his acrobatic skills, for example, in the dances at Gym, that really helped the competition between the sides beautifully. But I've heard the story, and maybe I've even heard it from Russ, that the compliment from Fred Astaire, and hey, a compliment from Fred Astaire, yeah, it doesn't get better, I guess.
Of course. I mean, one of the things that I find quite striking about watching West Side Story 1961 and comparing it to different movie musicals that come out today is that there's that really clear understanding, maybe because musicals were more prevalent during like the golden age of MGM musicals, for example, which of course you're familiar with. You were in several of them. Is that it's kind of the importance of showing the dancers from head to toe, because I really get upset when I see big dance numbers that are overly edited, like too many cuts too quickly, where you don't actually get to see the dancers dance, which to me negates the purpose of doing a big choreographed dance number. So I'm curious, when you guys were doing the big dance numbers on the movie, were you doing very long takes, or was it just very clearly designed of this long stretch is going to be here, so do that whole thing? Or, I'm curious about the technical process of capturing what would be edited together, because even the cuts, I was looking through them again, the cuts are very seamless, so you can still follow the choreography even if the camera angle is changing.
I don't have any firsthand knowledge because I never talked to Jerry and Bob in the working process. I was just there to do my job. But I, just as we said earlier about Gene, when he created a number, he knew exactly where, with the camera angle, for what section of the, what where the camera would be for a particular section of the number, and therefore it's seamless. So that was planned, and I think that was the case on West Side Story as well. We everything on West Side Story, songs, dance sequences, dramatic scenes, everything was rehearsed like it was for the theater before we ever started filming. And all the location work had been planned before that as well. So Jerry and Bob knew where on what section of the prologue would be in that part of the location. So there weren't overly long takes, as I recall. I never thought to myself, well, this take is too long or so long. Or it was so well thought out and planned. And Bob Wise was known as an incredible editor. So that was an important, I think, aspect of his work and the way he approached things as well. So I hope that's an answer to your question. But there were not overly long takes because they knew exactly what part of the number would be seen from that camera angle and from that part of that section of New York, which was the set, really.
Yeah, because I think it's very beautifully shot and edited together, because I felt like when I was trying to study why I like that movie so much and why I like those dance numbers so much and comparing them to certain movie musicals that get made today, I just feel like it was really abiding by what Gene Kelly would say, which is, if you're going to film a big dance number with a bunch of dancers, you have to show the dancers in their entirety from the top of their head to the tip of their toe, which I think, bafflingly, there are a lot of instances, and I'm not asking you to speak ill of any, this is me just sharing my opinion, but I've noticed that there will be dance numbers in movie musicals that are made today where there's too many shots where you're not even seeing the full dancer's body. And again, it's like, why is this a dance number if you're not going to show me the dancers dancing? So I just think the design was on point.
I'm in total agreement with you, because I thought, would I want to see Sid Charisse in close up? Well, no, I want to see everything, of course. And dance, you want to see the dance, you want to see the movement. And I'm with you. I think editing, and too much editing, even in scenes, I would think, but certainly in movement is, I sometimes think that sort of the MTV, where they were just promoting a record. And so all kinds of editing took place, and I think it became a habit in a way. And I agree with you that I think things are over edited myself, and I feel cheated if I can't see the full figure.
Another thing that you're often asked about in relation to West Side Story is the whole matter of Jerome Robbins being fired while the film was still in production. I don't really want to ask you much about that, just because I've watched so many interviews and you've told this story so many times. But one detail about it that I was curious about, that I'm not sure if you've talked about quite as much, is I don't know where I read this, so again, I would rather just ask you and you can tell me if it was true because you were in the movie, is After he was fired, was it true that there were some assistants of his that stayed on to work with all of you for more of the dance numbers and musical numbers?
Yes, Tony Mordente was, I think, one of Jerry's assistants, not the only one. And my understanding, and I guess I should, but the dance at the gym was photographed after Jerry was gone. And I think that's when they put in some tumbling for us to create more competition. But so Tony, I'm just with me it's hearsay as well, but my understanding is that Tony Mordente took over to help Bob. You know, although I think I don't there was no influence with Bob as to what angle to photograph anything. Tony just kept it going, I suppose. That's a lousy answer for you, but so yes, Tony Mordente, who was one of Jerry's assistants, not the main assistant, but Tony helped Bob in the dance at the gym, maybe in the Rumble as well, but not in the Rumble, but in the dance at the gym. To what degree, I don't know, but he was present and helpful in some way.
One of the things that I really love about whenever you're talking about West Side Story and the same questions that get asked over and over again is how consistent you are about giving both Natalie and Richard full credit for their performances, because when I was a kid watching this movie, I had no idea that they had drama on, like, this weird tension between them where she wouldn't talk to him for whatever petty silly reason, and it was just this awkward. I had no idea because I was just fully invested in the love story, and I had no idea until I got older and figured out how to Google trivia about movies. And I thought that I still, even now as a more judgmental not child anymore, I still love their performances, and it breaks my heart whenever I see interview quotes from from Richard in particular, when he feels like his performance wasn't good enough. And I said, oh sweetie, don't say that. It was beautiful. I'm still moved. I'm still invested. And I love that you're always so consistent in saying that both of them did a great job, because I completely agree.
I absolutely agree with you. Completely. Yeah, the thing, my understanding was, because again, I didn't hear it from Natalie or for anybody, but we all heard that Natalie wanted either Warren Beatty or her husband, Robert Wagner, to play Tony. And I think she did play sick for a couple of days to try to get her way. It didn't work. Richard is such a great guy, and he's so beautiful in this film. He's so wonderful. But working with Natalie, and most of his important scenes were with Natalie, and evidently she did not speak to him. I remember he and I went to the same gym, and once we started talking, and this was well after the fact, and he has a wonderful sense of humor, and he's a lovely, lovely guy. And he said, well, I could have spoken to her too. He was, in retrospect, thinking, he was at fault too for this not communicating, but evidently she did not speak to him. And Robert Wise, with you never want to say anything that sounds like it's against someone, but Bob Wise was not an on-hand sort of director. He kind of just let things happen. So Reverend Richard, working with an actress who didn't speak to him, and a director who said almost nothing. And Richard told me he was on the phone a lot with Sandy Meisner, a drama coach in New York. He was getting help from him.
Whenever you say this detail, because I've heard you tell this story in other interviews, whenever you say that, that always makes me geek out that you're calling him Sandy. Because for anyone watching this who doesn't know, I was going, oh, does Sanford Meisner go by the name Sandy? So for anyone who doesn't know, if you're interested in acting or you're taking acting lessons, there's many techniques that are very famous. One of them is the Meisner technique. And I was like, what is this worlds colliding of just, yeah, it's just so funny whenever you say that. I love that you do that though, because you'll be like, oh yeah, Sandy Meisner or Jerry Robbins, this like familiarity with these people.
Well, see, because I didn't know. I say Sandy Meisner myself, but I mean, so given the circumstances, we have to credit Richard even more for his performance because he really was working alone, you know. I mean, I don't like to say that, but it's true. And I also don't like to say anything unkind about Natalie because I loved her and she was so beautiful as a person as well. So I sometimes don't like telling that story because I don't like saying anything even slightly negative, so to speak, about Natalie. But I guess that was the case.
Well, and wasn't I mean, I think she was very young in this movie, and I think any
23.
yeah, and I think anybody who is, over the age of 25 would probably feel like, listen, I'm embarrassed by how I acted when I was 16, 18, 20 years old.
Right.
Rest in peace, Natalie, obviously, since she's not around anymore. But I feel like this is my speculation. I didn't know her. But if she had lived longer and was coming to these reunions with all of you, I think it's fully within the realm of possibility that she and Richard would have made up or whatever and been able to publicly be cool and cute with each other at these reunions the way you and Rita are with each other. So
Absolutely. Of course that would have happened, because we all behave badly at times, and then years later we think, "Oh, why did I do that?" So it's not unique to this situation. Those things happen, but I agree with you. She would have been the first, probably after the fact, to say, "Oh my God, whatever," and apologize and try to make up for it.
I feel like one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough when giving Richard the credit that he deserves is that West Side Story is based on Romeo and Juliet, which is a Shakespeare play, and not only that, it's my favorite Shakespeare play, even though it's incredibly misunderstood thematically. And I feel like West Side Story is a great interpretation of Romeo and Juliet because people are able to better understand what the actual themes of the play are. It's not just about love, it's about, bigotry and hatred and how toxic that is and how it spreads. And when you look at the character of Romeo, he's a child and he's incredibly naive and full of hope, and it isn't until he comes into contact with this violence and this feud between two groups that have no real legitimate reason to hate each other. They just hate each other because they do. And that naivete is what gets corrupted by the violence. And I think that Richard being just, with his big eyes full of hope, and he's just so sweet and lovely, and then he's just devastated by the loss of his friend. I think he fully nailed it, and I don't think anywhere near enough people give him credit for that. Maybe because maybe they think Shakespeare is too pretentious. And I'm like, well, I don't know why you're talking about movies for a living if you think Shakespeare is too pretentious, but okay.
I think one of the problems, things that can happen, if one person of influence or not says something about a performance, and then it just catches on and people start repeating it, and it takes on a life that it doesn't deserve. So I don't know. Okay, between you and me, Russ, I probably okay. Russ has more than once said that he thought Richard was miscast because he wasn't streetwise or that kind of. And of course, I totally disagree. But I've never had the opportunity to say to Russ, why do you keep telling this story? Why do you want to put your thoughts in somebody else's mind and have this just perpetuate and go on and on and on, and then it becomes a negative against Richard, which is totally unfair. But I think that's how things, reviews and hearsay and gossip and things do take on a lot. But I'm absolutely in accord with you that Richard's performance is just that the last scene where he's been shot, and the way he plays that, I mean, he's so terrific. He's just so terrific. Yeah, and again, the one, you know, the in the 1960 on West Side Story, I think that with everything about race and all of that stuff, it's all there. But for example, in the balcony sing between Natalie and Richard, he says good night, and she very sweetly says buenas noches. Doesn't that say something? Just those two short lines. And then later in the bedroom scene together, after everything has happened, the rumble and everything, and there's a line, I think it's Natalie. She says, "It's not us, it's everything around us." I mean, these are very short, simple lines, but they say a lot. You don't need to keep padding it to try and make the case, so to speak. I think, you know.
Well, I mean, hopefully he's warmed to it a little bit. I know that he visited the Spielberg set while it was being filmed, so I think he's made his peace with the whole concept of West Side Story at this point. So that's good. Another person that I wanted to bring up, though, that I don't know if you ever really get asked much about him, but I feel like he absolutely should be part of the conversation, is Tucker Smith, because like obviously when I was a kid watching the movie, I didn't know that Ice was an original character for the movie, but I thought that he was so cool, no pun intended, and he had so much charisma. He really popped on camera even when Riff is around and doing most of the talking, but he's just there, and he's just really tough looking, but he's really handsome, and in particular, he really has to pick up the slack in the second half of the movie, because that's when Bernardo is not around anymore, Riff is not around anymore, so he really has to rise up and take control of the gang, and there's a lot going on, and trying to find Tony and all of that. Early on in the movie, there's a song that Riff is singing, but it's not actually Russ Tamblin's vocals, it's Tucker Smith's vocals.
Yeah, it's the Jet song. Yes. Yeah.
Point being that, like, I think he's a great part of the movie, and I think he should be part of the conversation with the rest of you legends. I mean, sadly, he's not around anymore either, but, you know, anything you want to say about him? And
you're absolutely right. Tucker was fantastic. He was so cool. I mean, I think cool was the best number in the film. And what Tucker playing Ice, and you're right, Bernard, they're gone. So Ice is the new leader, and he's the one who's keeping his gangs calm, because and putting the lid on it, and that's what Cool is about. But Tucker is, he's fantastic. He's just, and you're right, he should absolutely be part of the conversation. Cool, and Cool is beautiful as a number, but he is so incredible in his performance in Cool, and singing Cool, and his, I'm going on, but I'm absolutely with you. Give credit whenever credit is due, as often as possible.
I thought he was just as iconic as the rest of the kind of more prominent, more discussed leaders. And, you know, I feel like he's one of those people that, like Natalie, if he was still around, I feel like he would be at the reunions, and people would be giving him his flowers, and deservedly so, because he was so good.
Tucker got lots of attention from his performance in West Side Story. Lots of attention in Japan and so on. He was a star, and unfortunately we lost him too soon. But yeah, Tucker had his charisma. I don't know what to say. He was just terrific. He was just really one, and he was such a funny, lovely guy. You would have loved him in person as well.
One of my favorite moments of the movie actually involves you and Russ and Tucker. It's when all of you are at Doc's shop, and initially you're there to have your meeting, and you're gonna lay out the terms of the rumble that you want to have with each other. But then once the cops show up, then, you know, you put on the charade of, no, we're behaving, we're being friends. And that's really when you realize, like, oh no, whomever you thought the villain was, if you hadn't figured it out already, the villain of the story is the cops.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Because the cops, they made it seem like, okay, we want you guys to get along, but then once you guys are actually getting along, even if it's pretend, but they're being presented the image of these two groups getting along, and he's not happy about it because that's not what he actually wants. It's because there's a clear disparity between how he treats the Jets versus how he treats the Sharks. He tries to make a deal with the Jets, to try to sell out the Sharks, and like obviously that's very heavily rooted in racism. But specifically, the moment that I really love though is when Lieutenant Schrank says something to Bernardo to try to provoke a reaction. And Bernardo, well, that's you. Why am I talking about it like it's not you? So you like kind of lunge up, but both Riff and Ice reach out and stop you.
So what if they do turn this whole town into a stinking pigsty? Hey, don't stop them!
Because obviously, if you attack a cop, you're probably going to get, at best, beat up and arrested. Worse, you're going to get killed. And even if it is like, no, the cop's not going to be the one. We're going to be the one. But it's like, it's something so beautifully heartbreaking about that moment because it shows that, like, these two groups are the same and they could have been friends, but they're too, ignorant and they're too swept up in these ideas that they're supposed to hate each other when they really could have put their differences aside and, like, actually been friends. And it's one of my favorite moments of the movie. Every time I watch it, it's just like, no, see, you could have been friends.
I love the fact that you noticed that. And of course, the real prejudice against the gangs comes from Lieutenant Schrank, specifically to the Sharks more than anybody else. I mean, he's really horrible. And that moment when Russ and Tucker sort of calm Bernardo down for a moment, that's a bridge to Tucker to Ice being able to being the leader of the Jets after Russ is gone. But it's that I just love your observations because they're nice.
You're someone who comes from an immigrant background of like your parents immigrated, and then for me, I more so identify with not being American either because like most of my family is still in Japan. So regardless of where I'm born or where I live, it's like that's really more so where I culturally relate to. Because, identity and culture is something very personal and unique to a person. So for me, it's like that movie and that story, there are some musicals that even if the songs are good, the stories don't really age well because I'm just like South Pacific is super racist to me and I just really don't. I loved it when I was little, but as I've gotten older and I'm like, I don't like this story. I don't like it anymore. Even though like Mitzi Gaynor is great and like the songs are really good and Rodgers and Hammerstein are musical geniuses, but it's just not for me anymore. But musicals like West Side Story and The Sound of Music, they have not lost a single ounce of relevance because people still haven't figured it out. Like they haven't figured out how to just not fall for rhetoric that divides us. It's we should all embrace each other's cultural diversity and all of that. And so I love that. And then when you guys get kicked out, the Sharks, the kind of sarcastic whistling of my country 'tis of thee. I'm like,
yeah.
It's so good.
Well, when you mentioned there's a wonderful musical called The I Don't Care Girl with Mitzi Gaynor. The story is so flimsy, but there are 3 incredible dance numbers in it, staged by Jack Cole. So you can forget the movie, just watch it to see those numbers, So I think in a lot of those movie musicals, the stories were not strong. The reason for going to them was to see the musical numbers. And you're right, Sound of Music and West Side Story, the stories are the thing.
Those stories, I feel like thematically they're so much more rich and interesting, and also it's with great music on top of that. So what's not to love?
Yeah, and great performances. I mean, everyone, Christopher Plummer, Julie Andrews, and I'm sorry, the actress. Okay, I can't think of her name right now, but the beautiful actress who plays the love interest that doesn't take for him. She's a famous actress, and I'm ashamed to not remember her name right now. But she was wonderful too. She was so wonderful. It's a Bob Wise movie, but you're right. Thematically, it was about important things, as West Side Story was too, and also, and I guess we can say pretty safely about both of them, these things still exist in today's world. They're still with us.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that type of thematic material, I need to make sure that I mention this before whenever I decide to end the interview. So obviously, you and I, we've been trying to make this interview happen for a bit. So my friends know that I've been very excited about doing this interview. And one of my friends kept saying to me over these last couple weeks, like, you have to tell him that we love La Ragazza di Bube.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Because, you know, this is coming from a friend of mine who's very politically, you know, engaged. And so, you know, an anti-fascist film like that, he's just fully on board. He was like, it's so good. You have to watch it. He was taking screenshots from the movie and sending them to me. Yeah, and I was watching it last night. So I would be very interested to hear about the experience of making that movie, because it's something very different from how movies would be made today, of not only you going overseas to make a movie in a different country's industry, specifically Italy, but also it seems like, I don't know what you were being given, but your lines seem to be dubbed because it's in Italian. So just what the process was to make that movie, I would be so interested to hear about.
Well, first of all of my scenes with Claudia Cardinale were in English. At that, and by the way, that's the first movie that Claudia made where they used her voice. She had always been dubbed before that herself. That was a thing that was happening in Italian movies a lot. You could have an actor from France, and actors from different countries. It didn't matter because everybody knew they would be dubbed. Now, I knew that I would be dubbed, of course, in Italian because I spoke in English, but the scenes with Claudia were very thoroughly and properly written in English for us, you know, because you couldn't have done it otherwise. So that was the working process. And also, you know, that was 1963 or something like that. And the 60s were just a really wonderful decade for Italian cinema across the board. Visconti, different people. In fact, when I was working on La Ragazza di Bube, Claudia left for a few days to go to the Cannes Film Festival for The Leopard, the film that Visconti film that she made with Alain Delon and Burt Lancaster. So, and Luigi Comencini, our director on Bebo's Girl, was one of those Italian directors. He was funny, but the working atmosphere, I thought about it afterwards, was. I'll say more, you know, lunch was a big deal, having a glass of wine, you know, and so it was a more at ease kind of way of working. It didn't affect the work, but it just, it was a different sort of comfort level, I suppose, that was really beautiful. So some funny things happened on that movie. There were just one of them, I had a stop date for something else I was going to do. I don't remember what it was, but there was the last day that I was there, and they had to finish with me that day. And we were on location in Siena in northern Italy. And so we arrived at this location somewhere out in the wilderness, and we were there. Everybody was there but the cameraman. And so everybody's waiting for the cameraman, and finally he gets there. And when he gets there, they all start yelling at each other, "Where were you?" Blah, blah, blah. And then when they get it over with, we just work and everything's fine. But it was funny that the emotional response to somebody, they were very frank about it, is the thing. Yeah.
It's interesting to study the way that the industry evolves on a global level, or even just within the Hollywood ecosystem. Because, for example, one of the things that I was curious to ask you about, because I don't think anyone has ever outright asked you about this in at least the interviews that I saw. I mean, you've done so many over the years. But so one of the things that used to exist in the industry that does not anymore is the Hays Code. So you started working in the industry when the Hays Code already existed, and then you were able to continue working through its eventual demise, and then it became the rating system, which has changed a few times. So, for example, if we take West Side Story as an example, there was a line changed from the stage musical to the movie of, it used to be sperm to worm, but they changed it from birth to earth, you know, things like that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about the evolution of how that affected the material that was being played out either by you or the people around you, and then that kind of that thing being lifted and then having that increasing amount of ability to express oneself in stories.
Well, it was something that I never thought about, because it's, in the things that I was doing, it was never an issue. But the sperm to worm or birth to earth, I mean, it's funny how both of those phrases say the same thing. And I don't think there's you lose anything by the change. But I can understand sperm to worm, okay. But in the films that I was involved in, I suppose even in West Side, I never thought about that one. But it wasn't something that I was conscious of, or sort of, I suppose, even needed to be, because the material that I was dealing with didn't go there. And so it was never an issue that was raised in anything that I was working on. So I had less of an awareness of that myself at the time.
Another thing that you've been able to experience firsthand that is no longer around anymore is Technicolor. So not only you as a child growing up and falling in love with movie musicals and wanting to be in the movies yourself, I think part of what makes those films so iconic is that they were shot on Technicolor, and the equipment to shoot things on Technicolor does not exist anymore because the companies don't manufacture it anymore. I mean, I don't know, maybe if you're Martin Scorsese, if you want to cut a deal for a film and they special make it for you, but just as a general tendency, it's not offered anymore. So I'm curious, the process of shooting a movie versus seeing the end result, is it very visually striking to see the final product compared to when you're just on set on the day of filming what is going to be in the movie?
Well, again, this thing of the word Technicolor, again, having been a chorus dancer in movie musicals, and when we got to see that movie and see that number that we were all part of, you notice all that lovely Technicolor stuff, because it's a musical number. The floor is shiny, and everybody's in a lovely costume, and so but so it's not a drama, and so I appreciated things that way. And I guess when you say certain things, certain sequences, and certain people come to mind in my mind when I hear the word Technicolor, because Technicolor was incredible, especially for musical numbers, you know, and also for certain. I think Technicolor makes me think of Marilyn Monroe, because she was good in black and white, but wow, we needed to see her in Technicolor to really get it, you know, to really have it punch. The Misfits is black and white, and she's lovely in it, but I mean, Niagara, I mean, you know, Technicolor is a big deal, and a very important way of presenting something. So just again, for the things I was involved in, I appreciated. I never thought of Technicolor black and white, and some of the Diamond Head or things that I was in, or even La Ragazza di Bube, which was in black and white. I never thought of those things myself at the time, but in retrospect, again, God, color. Some stories are should be in color, and some stories are better in black and white. It depends on the story and the kind of film you're making. I may not be answering your question very well, but so my awareness of the process of either black and white or Technicolor, for example, was I appreciate it more as someone who, as an audience member, more than someone involved in the process.
The thing with Technicolor is that one of the things that makes it distinct compared to the equipment that's used today to shoot movies is just that the colors. I'm not a super expert on this, but my superficial understanding of it is that the colors would appear more vibrant when you shot on Technicolor compared to whatever types of equipment are used to shoot on film or digital today. It's just it's a look all on its own. Like when Martin Scorsese did the film The Aviator, I think he collaborated with a number of people when filming to ensure that they would film it a certain way that would also help to allow the people who worked in like the digital effects and the color grading to try to color grade the footage to make it look like how movies used to look when they were shot on Technicolor, which I love the commitment to you know the concept and the aesthetic. And of course Scorsese, he's like a film historian himself, so he knows all about from the very beginning of the creation of film to what's going on today.
Well, you're so incredibly aware of all of this stuff, and you've learned a lot about it, much more than I have. But color and the kind of color, also the kind of color, for example, some color in some movies is a kind of muted color, as opposed to color in Mitzi Gaynor musical or Betty Grable musical. That's the kind of technical, or Carmen Miranda in color, you know. That's the more vibrant, beautiful technicolor that I grew up with and loved. But that kind of color doesn't necessarily suit itself to a dramatic film. So it depends technically, I'm sure, on how you use color and how, whether they're muted or vibrant and all of that. You know more about that. I know nothing about that. I know as an audience member, again, I think I appreciate color when it's really used beautifully, and it is used differently in different projects.
So I mentioned at the beginning of the interview that people often ask you about Marilyn Monroe because you are one of the dancers in one of the most iconic pieces of musical film history, which is the Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend number. Even recently, I mean, I don't know if this would be the type of movie that you would see, but there was a superhero movie that came out 2 years ago called Birds of Prey, and there's a very short dream sequence where they kind of recreate that number, where there's the main character of the movie, she's imagining herself as being that character. So she's in the pink dress, and the character is already blonde, so it's not really a stretch. To have a superhero blockbuster, you know, how many decades later, still paying homage to that is something pretty incredible. I have to kind of raise an eyebrow sometimes at the way people ask you about being a part of that, because it seems like they're fishing for gossip about Marilyn Monroe because they kind of believe the stereotypes that are kind of negative about her. And I really appreciate that you're so consistent in talking about how professional she was on set and how she was a very, very good actress, and she was not, I mean, I feel like, this is just my interpretation, but sometimes when you're asked about this in interviews, it feels like the person asking the question is wanting you to say that she was sloppy, drunk, and high on pills on set, which she was not. And you've said this so many times. If people would do even an hour of research, they would find that. But I just wanted to commend you for never taking the bait and for just constantly giving her credit. And the same could be said for Judy Garland, because a lot of people are overly harsh in their judgments of her, and you had a job where you worked on one of her shows as I think a choreographer's assistant or something, and you always maintained that they were both very professional women, very good at what they did, and you never take the bait. So I just want to commend you for that.
Well, thank you, thank you. Listen. I believe in a story being told accurately and not elaborating it in some way just for the fun of it, because it's important. The truth is important, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I have a great deal of respect for both of those women and what they did professionally, but also just dealing with how cruel the industry and the media could be about them struggling with addiction and mental health. And I mean, a lot of people struggle with addiction or mental health, so it's, you know, it's something you should have empathy for that, not you know, kick them while they're down. It's just really cruel. So
I remember I was doing a play in Buffalo with Kim Hunter, and on my way to rehearsal, this is back in 1971 or something like that. And on my way to rehearsal, there was one of those newsstands with one of those Enquirer, one of those magazines, and it had a very unflattering picture of Rita Hayworth on the front. I mean, I was so offended when I saw that picture. I thought, this is really mean. I mean, why? So I want to come to the defense of people like that, because that's what should happen, instead of this blatant meanness or something. Anyway, I don't like that.
yeah. So, with working on Judy's show, were you choreographing, were you helping her or the dancers that were in her show?
I was working with the dancers. Robert Alton, who staged, you know, they had done movies at Metro. That's how they knew each other. So when she was doing, this was her first Vegas appearance, and she wanted Bob Alton, and she was so right to, he was fantastic. He was great. Everybody loved Bob, and he knew everybody's name, no matter what you did. But he had a wonderful woman, Joan Bailey, who was his female assistant working on that. And I was the male assistant because she had 11 guys in the show with her. The first number started with a guy, each guy had a placard with a letter on it. And there was a special material written by Roger Edens introducing her before she comes on stage. Each one of them has a letter, a placard with a letter on it, and they spell different things with those letters. And they finally spell Judy Garland, and she comes out. So I had to work with the guys. I learned the steps that they had to do, and I taught them those steps. That was my only involvement in that. I never had to work with her or even talk to her, you know, but I got to be around her, and she was so funny. I mean, and she learned so quickly. So quick. She didn't need to do something over and over and over again. You know, it was there. I remember one day, Joan, and we were rehearsing to. She had an album that had just come out called, I think it was just called Judy, and she sings "Come Rain or Come Shine" in that particular album, and we were using that recording for rehearsals. So she was never had to sing out because it was her voice, you know. And one day, Joan, Bob's assistant, said to Bob quiet. She said, because she hadn't heard Judy really sing out, you know, and she said to, this is pretty much verbatim. She said to Bob quietly, she said, you know, when is she going to do it? And Bob often said, just wait. Just wait. That's it. Wait and you'll see. Because he knew her and he knew how she worked.
I know that you often mention this story of a young Liza Minnelli coming to a rehearsal and you teaching her some dance steps, which I find that so endearing. But I also was curious, did you ever meet her other daughter, Lorna Luft?
I don't think I have. No. I've seen Liza a number of times over the years, but I don't think I have. I don't remember it right now, so I don't think I have.
Yeah, I was curious and I had to ask because Lorna, I mean, obviously more or less everyone knows who Liza Minnelli is, and they know that she's a legend, and of course we give her flowers just like we give Judy Garland flowers. But I feel like Lorna doesn't get enough credit because she was in one of my favorite movie musicals, which is Grease 2. I love that movie. I will not have anyone say a single bad word about the songs or anything. It is such a fun time. I like it better than the first Grease movie. And yeah, she's in that movie. And when I first fell in love with that movie, I didn't know she was Judy Garland's daughter. And then I, looked her up online, and it said, and then I went, oh, well, there's the talent, of course. The talent in that family. Ridiculous.
Well, and because Eliza, I think, came onto the scene first, as I recall, and somewhere I thought, it couldn't have been easy to be Marilyn Monroe, for example, and I thought, well, it probably wasn't easy to be Lorna Lufton, to be Eliza's sister, and Eliza's getting all the attention. What was that like, and I'm now vaguely remember that I have met her, and I saw one of her shows. But it's vague. But what was the movie with her again?
Grease 2.
Okay, I've never seen it, but now I want to see it. But you're right. Of course, she's absolutely, of course, a talented girl as well. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she plays a great character because, so basically, in the movie, she's interested in a guy, but he's, for a lot of the movie, trying to get back with his ex, and he kind of keeps stringing her along, and she gives this really great speech towards the end of the movie where she just lays into him.
Maybe you can bully some of the chicks in this school, but this chick has been bullied by one Johnny Nagarelli for the last time.
It was so ahead of its time, and but I won't chew your ear off about all my opinions about Grease 2, but she's really great in it, and yeah. Another thing that I wanted to ask about, I'm so curious, is that you have worked with Yul Brynner, and he just seems like such an interesting person. I really don't know what to make of him. You told such a funny story in this one other interview where you were saying that he had a Japanese mistress, and that you were saying, yeah, I mean, she was really nice, and like you didn't know what else to say about it.
That was on a movie called Flight from Ashia, made in Japan, and it was with Yul Brynner and Richard Widmark. And one of the charming things about that was they were so opposite as people. Yul wasn't. He wasn't flamboyant. He was just, he enjoyed his life, and he always lived comfortably and the way he liked. The Japanese girl, they call her Silky. She was a beautiful girl. She was very sweet, and he didn't hide it. And his son was with him as well. He had a couple of secretaries, and so he had his entourage, and that's the way he lived, and it was great. He was. He was lovely. He was really nice. And on Kings of the Sun, the next movie I did with him, his wife was there. So Silky he didn't have a mistress. His wife was there, so it was different. But he was a really good photographer. So when he wasn't working, he spent a lot of time photographing things. And one story that I think says a little bit about him, when we were working on Flight from Ashia, that film is about, it was Yul and Richard and me. And so there are three different stories in this film: Richard's story, Yul's story, and my story. So, and Yul went to Russia's like good professional all the time. And because there were other stories being filmed, he didn't see himself in the rushes very much a lot of the time. And I heard this from Richard Widmark, otherwise I would never have known. But Yul evidently tried to get the story changed and some rewriting done, so to have more screen time for him. And Richard Widmark would not have it. He didn't let it happen. And I thought, Yul could have done that to me because I was a kid. What did I know? But he couldn't do it to another professional, and it didn't work. But so again, Yul lived his way, and Richard lived very quietly, you never saw him socially. He was with his wife in the hotel, whatever. So they were. I love the difference between those two guys because of such a nice difference, you know.
You were in, was it the original cast of Stephen Sondheim's company?
Not the original cast. I did the national company with Elaine Stritch and a lot of the original people. That was, I do remember that year, it was 1971. And oh God, I had such a great time. And one of the reasons I had such a great time is because of just Elaine Stritch was so incredible. And she was, wow, funny. You know, one of a quote that I just read just recently about her, and it's Elaine Stritch line. She said, "Just give me a bottle of vodka and a floor plan." Is that a great line? I mean, come on. But that's just a very quick one. And the beauty of being in her company, I liked her so much. And on stage, there's just no one like Elaine. She was extraordinary, so incredible, so special.
Did you get to meet Sondheim at all, or?
Yeah, of course. It was directed by Hal Prince. So I worked with Hal every day. And Stephen came around a few times, worked a lot less with Stephen. When we were in San Francisco, he came with Hal to see the show there after it had been open for a few weeks. So, and he was very quiet. And one of the things I've always loved about Stephen's, I mean, his use of words, not just in his songs, but in his speech. He was so incredibly articulate in all, and he was so articulate, he could talk about anything and anybody and be kind and be correct. He was never nasty about anyone that I could ever, and I always loved that about him. And I, you know, I'll give myself a little pat on the shoulder here. But the big song that Bobby, the character I played in that, does is a song, wonderful song called "Being Alive," and so that was the big song hymn toward the end of the show, and Stephen said to me after a performance, he said, "That's the best being alive I've ever heard." And wow, that was, I've thought about it since and have appreciated it, but at the time it kind of went over my head. But the fact that that came from Stephen, who was so judicious in his language, was a real, I felt really comfortable doing that show. I felt really confident vocally, and that was a great help, of course, in that show.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about when I was looking online for different things that you had done was you had this really cool appearance on the Carol Burnett show where you did this musical number involving a guy playing a Greek bouzouki.
I did an appearance at Caesar's Palace in Vegas, and one of the numbers that we had in my part of the evening was about the Greek dance and singing the song from Never on Sunday, a Melina Mercouri film in which she was so incredible, and it was a lovely movie. So of course, I'm Greek. I thought, well, we have to do something Greek, and loved doing it. And so when I was on the Carol Burnett show, they suggested that I do that number on her show. So we did, and because we had such great dancers, we got more bodies on the screen, and so I had more impact. But it was fun. First of all, Carol Burnett was just the best. Everybody loves Carol, rightfully so. She's just so gracious. She's just so great. So doing that number, doing anything on the Carol Burnett show would have been fun. But I got to do that number, and I think it was very nicely staged and photographed on the show, as I recall. But again, you know, our backgrounds in this case really influenced my doing that number at all. But it was a good number, I think. I haven't seen it for a long time.
It was a lot of fun to watch. I was curious, have you ever watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
Oh God, no. How could I miss that?
It's
No.
so good. So it's a movie that came out, I think, in 2002, and it was this kind of small independent film that I think it had a really small. God, it must have only had a budget of something like $5 million, but it became one of the highest grossing films ever to, even though it never hit number one at the box office, but just really great word of mouth because it was just such a charming, endearing story just about culture clash. And
I heard about it a lot. I don't know why I've never seen it. Doesn't make sense, but I haven't.
You should watch it because I would be very curious to get your feedback on what you thought of My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Because the thing with that movie is that I don't think you even need to be Greek to really get it. Because like I love that I'm not Greek, I'm Japanese, and one of my dear friends who's Filipino Swedish. Just when you kind of have that immigrant background or that you're aware of the existence of your culture not always perfectly aligning with the culture that's around you and people thinking that it's eccentric or whatever is so it's very relatable beyond just the Greek culture.
Well, based on your description of the success of that film, clearly it reached different kinds of cultures to have that kind of an audience. So that speaks to the quality of the film itself. Absolutely.
It's really fun and very charming. It's about love and family and all that kind of good stuff. So, you know, if you're just sitting at home just relaxing and you want something to watch, maybe check it out and I'll email you or something. Be like, George, what did you think? Did you watch it?
I will check it out. I feel apologetic that I haven't seen it, but I will.
So one last small question I want to ask, because I've already kept you for so long. Murder, She Wrote. You were on an episode. That's just one of those, not guilty pleasure shows, because I don't feel guilty, but I think it's so much fun, and Angela Lansbury's great, but I don't know if you have much to say about doing a one-off appearance on it, but it's I don't know if you had anything you'd like to share, because it's such a beloved fun whodunit show. So
first of all, Angela Lansbury was again, we'll talk about something like Carol Burnett, somebody who's gracious. I mean, she really is, and she took great care to welcome everybody on that show. She's what you feel from her as a performer is what you get in life. You can feel that in her performances as well, I think, but she has a great reputation for good reason. So everybody wanted to do Murder, She Wrote, you know, everybody. Yeah. So I got to do one. I don't think it was the best part I've ever had the chance to play, but it was Murder, She Wrote, and I wanted to be there. So, but I think I got killed.
I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch that episode to see, because I don't remember if I've seen that specific one, because I was researching so many of your other things, like other interviews.
Sure.
And projects where you were a little bit more prominent felt like a better use of my time for research. But I made a note of it in my notes. I said, oh, he was on Murder, She Wrote. I got to ask him about that. But so I've kept you for long enough. I will just close this off by reminding everyone that George has a memoir out called My West Side Story, a memoir. And he also has a jewelry line. So if you have the disposable income and you'd like to get a lovely piece of silver jewelry, feel free to pick up one or both of these items, since we could not get to all of your stories, but many more of them are in the book. So thank you so much, George. I cannot even believe that you just spent all this time telling me stories about Gene Kelly and Judy Garland and one of my favorite movies that I grew up watching that you were in. This was so cool. I'm so excited. I had so much fun.
Well, listen, you're so informed, and so you're a wonderful person to talk to, because you're a lot smarter than I am. So this has been fun. It really has. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. So hopefully this recorded fairly well, and if not, I should at least have the audio, so I could always just treat it as like an audio recording. I mean, podcasts are a thing, so we've made our best attempt. So thank you very much.
Thank you, honey. Thank you so much. Thank you.